We just have to go after it and stay after it. That was Sam Walton's relentless pursuit of excellence. It seems to be the perfect way to start this episode because Sam Walton, I wanted to do Sam Walton from the beginning. You know, if you've listened to 10 episodes now, this is the 10th episode, I have mentioned the greats, right? The Mount Rushmore, the goats of entrepreneurship. I wanted to start with them and then link everything back to them. And you would have heard me mention Walton so many times because Walton is a goat. Sam Walton. I didn't even know who Walton was. I grew up in Cape Town, South Africa. We didn't have American products. I am a child of the apartheid. That is a time when South Africa legalized racism and the world said no thank you and pulled out all its money and all its businesses. Not all countries, by the way. It's a lot of countries stayed. But what I learned about Sam, when I started studying Sam, I was blown away by this man. He was just incredible. He was absolutely incredible. He was someone, I mean, you'll find out. Definitely stick around. This is a great episode. I'm very proud of this episode. And of course, I am proud of our headline sponsor, which is pitchcapital.com. Pitch Capital solves the problem that every single founder who's building something massive seems to have, which is how do I raise money? And if I'm raising money, how do I continue to build my product at the same time? How do I find the time to work with my team? How do I hire? How do I find space? How do I have time to work on discovery and development and all those things? Pitch Capital allows you to do it. It helps you raise money quickly. It helps you get meetings in minutes, pitch decks in 90 seconds, an AI that goes through and verifies and makes sure that you have a money model that works. It's Y Combinator in your pocket and on your screen. It's an opportunity to be in the right room with the right people and hopefully at the right time because your product or service works with the pain that currently exists. I've never seen anything like Pitch Capital. That's why I was proud to partner with them. I was proud to have them as a sponsor. If you look at the show notes, you will see there is a way to get on the wait list because there is a wait list, unfortunately, for this tech, for this opportunity. We just couldn't allow everyone to run in. And we will verify that you are who you say you are in your product or service. And if you are, I think you're going to be blown away by Pitch Capital. I know I was. And I'm incredibly thankful that they've been with us for this episodes 1 to 10. And while I am saying thank you, I am, as you can hear, quite choked up. This podcast is now the number 4 podcast in the whole of the United Kingdom. And that blows my mind. It's 123 in the world in the podcast charts on Apple. It is number 20 as of today on Apple's podcast under philosophy and business. I have so many of you, all of you to thank for that. And I'm constantly blown away. I'm on with 153 reviews on Spotify. I think it is 158. All of it. It's been incredible. It's been absolutely incredible. I'm so thankful. I'm thankful to Pitch Capital. I'm thankful to you. I'm thankful for this opportunity to share stories. This one's a special one because I wanted it to be a thank you to every single one of you for supporting this channel. Now to get into it. Sam Walton used to fly coach. In other words, he flew economy. In other words, he didn't believe in wasting money. He flew economy not because he had to, but because he believed wasting money was immoral. He stayed in cheap motels. He ate at diners. He shared hotel rooms with executives. And while his competitors were flying private jets and giving keynote speeches, Sam Walton was on his knees in a Walmart aisle, measuring shelf space with a ruler. That's how Walmart was built. Not with genius, but with fanaticism and fanaticism. He dreamed it and then he worked to get it. This is the story of the most underestimated force in business history. relentlessness. Sam Walton. A name you are going to be so familiar with by the end of this. Oh, I didn't even, how rude. I'm Jason Allan Scott. I've been in business for 35 years. I've sold or been involved in 9 exits. I've started 11 companies and 1 complete fiasco. Today, I run a 7-figure solo business with no staff. I consult for businesses from 100 grand to 3 billion. And after 3 decades of building companies, I've distilled everything I've learned into the only lessons that truly matter for achieving a new life, a rich life. That's what this is about. I believe that entrepreneurship is a philosophy and should be treated as one. That's why this is a philosophy podcast. I firmly believe that if you think like an entrepreneur, your entire life can change. And I believe, as Charlie Munger once said, that billions of dollars of information and education are in $5 books. And that's why we're here. I'm going to share the knowledge that I found through $5 books. Now, let's get to it. What if the secret to building a $1 trillion empire wasn't genius, but simple relentlessness? Sam Walton once told his team, when folks have used me, Sam Walton once told his team, when folks have asked me how Walmart did, I've usually been flip about answering them. Friend, we just got after it and stayed after it. That's it. No complex strategy, no revolutionary inventions. Just a man who refused to stop learning, refused to stop improving, and refused to quit. This episode is built from Sam Walton, Made in America, the autobiography Sam wrote in the final weeks of his life, dying of blood cancer, determined to leave something for you behind. Jeff Bezos was obsessed with this book. He handed out copies to Amazon executives with his own underlines and annotations. Walton's philosophy became Amazon's culture: frugality, speed, customer obsession. This is not the mythology of the folksy billionaire in a pickup truck. This is the methodology. Because Sam Walton didn't invent retail. He took simple ideas seriously, longer than anyone else had the discipline to do. Act 1. The last words that mattered. A few weeks before he died, Sam Walton wrote this. Could a Walmart-type story still occur today? Of course it could. Somewhere out there right now, there's someone with good enough ideas to go all the way. If they want it badly enough. I want you to think about that. The richest man in America dying, spending his final energy encouraging you to do something. Then he added, the next time some overeager, slightly eccentric shopkeeper opens a business in your town, go check it out. In this free country, that shopkeeper's success is entirely up to you. Sam Walton died weeks later at just the age of 74. Apologies. What he left wasn't just Walmart. Sam Walton left a brutal truth. Endurance is rare. Commitment is rare. Restlessness is rare. And because it's rare, it wins. Act 2. The hedgehog who never quit. Charlie Munger, one of my favorite investors, studied Sam Walton closely. He asked, how does a guy from Battenville, Arkansas, blow past Sears Roebuck? Munger's answer? Walton invented practically nothing. He copied everything anybody else did that was smart and just did it with more fanaticism. Sam wasn't a fox. He was a hedgehog. Foxes know many things. Hedgehogs know one big thing and obsess over it. Hedgehogs don't drift. They don't get bored, and they never, ever quit. They compound. That was Sam Walton. Act 3, the fire that never went out. Sam said, "If I had to single out one element in my life that made the difference, it would be a passion to compete." An old friend said, money was almost immaterial to him. He wanted to be on top of the heap. I love this idea. And Sam himself admitted this. He said, "I'm extremely competitive. I want to be the best." That's it. But then he says something deeper. First, we amazed ourselves. And before too long, we amazed everybody else too. And that's his pattern. That's the pattern of Walton's. That's the pattern I want you to remember. You don't need to convince the world. You just need to prove it to yourself long enough that the world has no choice but to notice you. The Great Depression operating system. Sam grew up during the Great Depression, America's own version of apartheid, I imagine. He said, "If you squander money you earned, you squandered your life." I feel like that about time and attention. But that belief that if you squander money you've earned, you've squandered your life, that belief became Walmart's edge. Every wasted dollar was wasted effort. Every saved dollar became advantage. His worldview shaped everything he did. I call this chapter the $75 a month beginning. It was June 3rd, 1940. Sam Walton reports to a J.C. Penney store in Des Moines, Iowa. His salary at the time, $75 a month. In his words, he writes, "That's the day I went into retail, and I loved it from the very beginning." His manager told him, Walton, I'd fire you if you weren't such a damn good salesman. Maybe you're just not cut out for retail." Imagine telling Sam Walton that. But even in the army, Sam studied retail. He checked out every book. He visited every store. His family even remembers vacations where he would go on store tours. Sam said, "I'm pretty sure no one in history has visited more retail stores than I have." This isn't curiosity. This isn't some sort of interest. It's practice. It's practice for a passion that would last him a lifetime. The Relentless learning machine, the $25,000 bet. At just 27, Sam would buy a Ben Franklin store for $25,000. 5 years later, it's the best store in the region. But then, disaster came. He forgot a lease renewal clause, and the landlord took the store. Sam called it the lowest point of his entire business life. Then, he says, "I'm not whipped. I found Newport. I can find another town." And that town was Bentonville. The all-night bus ride, Sam reads about self-service stores in Minnesota. So he rides a bus all night to see them. He walks in, he studies it, and he says, "I like it. I like it a lot. So I'll do it here." And that sentence built Walmart. Find what works, copy it fast, improve relentlessly. Have you noticed what he's doing? He's reading, he's learning, he's taking it in, and then he's going out to do something about it. He's not a genius like Edison. He's not a craftsman like Del Vecchio. He's not someone that understands great design like Steve Jobs. He's not James Dyson, willing to try something 5,127 times to prove it works. He's someone that reads a book and says, "It worked. I'm going to make it work. I'm going to go see the places where it worked. And I'm going to replicate that work for so long that I am almost guaranteed to be successful in that work. Years later, Sam would find a pair of panties for $2 a dozen. $2 a dozen, when the average panty was $2.50. When everyone was selling these for $3 for $1, Sam decided to sell 4, and sales tripled. Total profit shot through the roof. He realized that this was something called discounting. Lower margin, higher velocity, bigger outcome. And it was a culture that no one was talking about. Saturday meetings. Every Saturday morning, without exception, Sam ran a meeting. Executives flew in from everywhere. And the concept was dead simple. No hierarchy, no ego. One simple rule. Learn. Learn what worked. Learn what failed. Learn what the competition was doing this week. It is a relentless intensity that he put into routine. He would have routine supplier trips, routine times when he would fly economy. He believed to stay cheap. He believed in sharing rooms, not because of the optics of how it would look, but because he truly believed. He believed so much in what he was doing that he would study packaging. He would study shipping. He would study pallets. Not for the reason of domination over suppliers, but to understand the very system his suppliers needed to do better. He would do store visits. He would walk the stores alone over and over, every store he could find. He would measure the shelves. He would count the facings. He would check prices on memory. And managers, they weren't afraid because he was mean. They were afraid because he noticed everything. He believed that reality mattered more than titles. To treat people based on their work. To treat people based on the work that they did. And there's so many lessons here, right? We always have in this podcast the one-person empire toolkit. So here's my first one for you. Improve one thing every single day. Number 2, know your numbers cold. If you were to ask me about any single company I've ever started, I can tell you the numbers. I can tell you how much it cost, how much we sold. I can tell you my expenses. I can tell you the freelancers' costs. I can tell you contractors' costs. I can tell you shipping costs. I can tell you delivery costs. I can tell you consumable costs. I can tell you the cost of vodka, the cost of beer, the cost of champagne at the Penthouse London. I can tell you how much we paid Boulevard events and catering at Bloomsbury Ballroom. Every single one of those things. Why? Because I read this book. Because I realized how important it was to know your numbers cold. The next thing that Sam Walton taught me, that I hope he'll teach you, is control expenses like your life depends on it, because your life does. Another thing that Sam did, he invested in technology early. He always looked for a way to make things better, cheaper, faster, more convenient to the people, to the customer. He also think small. His rule would be think small as you grow big. But above all, remember, endurance beats everything. Of the top 100 discounters in 1976, all 76 disappeared. They didn't fail because they were dumb, by the way. They just stopped doing the work. The 10 rules. Before listing them, Sam used to say, if you don't already know what you need to know to work hard, you won't need this list. But he had a list. He had simple rules that he would tell everyone anytime he could. And the rules were simple. Rule number 1, commit to your business. Rule number 2, share profits with associates. Rule number 3, motivate your partners. Rule 4, communicate everything. Rule 5, appreciate people. Rule 6, my friends will know I do this one, celebrate success. Rule 7, listen to everyone. 8, exceed customer expectations. 9, as you guessed, control expenses. Swim upstream. That's it. Simple ideas taken seriously. April 5th, 1992. Sam Walton dies at 74. In his final months, he worked. He organized his knowledge so future generations like you right now, listening or watching this, could benefit. At the end, he asked if it was worth it. He answered, "If I had to do it all over again, I would make the exact same choices. No regrets." I want to remind you, Sam didn't invent retail or discounting. He didn't create a new category. He just got after it and stayed after it. That's how Walmart was built. That's how anything that lasts gets built. So I guess the only question that matters is, what are you willing to take seriously longer than everyone else? What simple thing will you execute with more discipline than seems reasonable? Because greatness doesn't belong to the smartest. It belongs to the most relentless. Remember to firstly amaze yourself. Then everyone else will have no choice but to pay attention. I want to remind you that Sam was a great salesman, but he was a terrible retailer. He would mess up paperwork and registers. And in Sam's own words, he said, "I couldn't stand to leave a new customer waiting while I fiddled with paperwork." His manager eventually, by the way, said to him, "Walton, I'd fire you if you weren't such a good salesman. But maybe you're just not cut out for retail." You remember me saying that right in the beginning. Isn't that mad? Imagine that. I think I'm bringing it up one more time because I just want to remind you. Don't let someone dictate what you can and cannot do or be. Sam Walton didn't. He simply learned obsessively. In fact, even in the army, he checked out every book on retailing from the library. He spent his off-duty time studying the Mormon Church's department store. He was preparing. And then that pattern, right? That pattern defines his entire life. He said, "I'm pretty sure no one in history has visited more retail stores than I have. Every day, all over the world, no matter where I am, I'm going inside stores and I am learning and seeing what they're doing." His wife said, "Sam never went by a Kmart that he didn't stop and look inside." His own kids remember, "Of course, we always had to stop and look at stores, any kind of stores, on the way to wherever we were headed." His family did not go on road trips. They went on store safaris. Sam treated learning like oxygen. And that obsession never stopped. Not at 30, not at 50, not at 70. In this podcast, I like to have something called the red string theory, where I connect it all. I want to connect his relentless learning. I want to talk about how he buys a Ben Franklin variety store in Newport, Arkansas for 25 G's. When he only had $5,000 at the time and he had to borrow from his father-in-law the other 20 grand. In his own words, he said, "I was 27 years old and full of confidence, but I didn't know the first thing about how to evaluate a proposition like this. So I just jumped right in with both feet." And isn't that entrepreneurship? You leap, and then you kind of become the kind of person who can survive a leap like that. But he sits down and he sets up a target. He said, "I wanted my little Newport store to be the best, most profitable variety store in Arkansas within 5 years." Have a target. Because in 5 years, he was best in the state. And then he says that line again, that line that explains everything he did. He says, "You can learn from everybody." I didn't just learn from reading. I also learned from the most incredible people, from studying what John Dunham was doing across the street. And his wife was paying attention. She said, "Sam was always over there checking on John, always looking at his prices, looking at his displays, looking at what was going on. He was always looking for a way to do a better job." And that's the method. Learn, copy, improve, repeat. Learn, copy, improve, repeat. The beat supplier habit. While other franchises followed approved supplier lists, Sam went off menu. He drove to Tennessee. He found better deals. He got special buyers at prices way below what Ben Franklin was charging. Ben Franklin, by the way, was a series of shops. He said this would drive Ben Franklin folks crazy. And here's what matters. Rules are for average operators. Edges. The edges are where the obsessed operators live. Charlie Munger said it best. Do things that other people are not doing. Sam was the only Ben Franklin franchisee driving to Tennessee to find suppliers that weren't on the approved list. And because he could buy at lower cost, he could lower his prices and get more customers. And that is his pattern. You'll remember earlier I talked about the panty story that built Walmart. It's a simple story that explains everything. So I want to say it again because maybe I feel like I didn't sell it when I said it the first time. Sam finds a supplier that's selling ladies' panties for $2 a dozen instead of the $2.50 that Ben Franklin, his competitor, is normally charging, right? He buys a franchise from Ben Franklin, so he's running a franchise. And most retailers are selling these for 3 pairs of dollars. He thinks he's doing well at 50 cents saving. But Sam decides to sell 4 pairs for $1. Sam says, by pricing it at 4 for $1, I could sell 3 times more than by pricing it at 3 for $1. Basically what he's saying is, he would make only half the profit per item. But because he was selling 3 times as many, the overall profit was so much greater, right? He loves this principle. And this is the essence of discounting. By cutting your price, you can boost your sales to a point where you earn far more at a cheaper retail price than you would have by selling the item at a higher price. So in retailer language, you can lower your markup, but earn more because of the increased volume. That's all it is. And that's discounting in one sentence. Lower margin, higher velocity, bigger total profit. And here's the true genius. He didn't do a tactic, inverted commas for those sight impaired. He discovered a principle. In the book, he says, I began to mull over the idea in Newport, but it would take another 10 years before I took this idea seriously. The lesson I wrote in the notes for myself, ideas simmer. You don't always use them immediately, but you store them. You test them. And when the time is right, you strike. That principle, discovered in 1945, would become the foundation of Walmart in 1962, 17 years later. Earlier, I talked about the devastating loss that taught him control. His store becomes a monster success. I mentioned that earlier. And 5 years later, Sam had met his goal, as I mentioned earlier. $250,000 in sales, $30,000 to $40,000 in profit. Number 1 Ben Franklin store in a 6-state region. But then, as I mentioned, disaster struck. He forgot a lease renewal clause. His landlord, a competitor who owned the building, was so impressed with Sam's success that he decided not to renew the lease at any price. Sam, now with 4 kids to support, said, "It is the low point in my business life. I felt sick to my stomach. I couldn't believe it was happening to me. It didn't seem fair. I blamed myself for ever getting suckered into such an awful lease." But then his lawyer sees him clenching and unclenching his fist. Sam straightens up and says to his lawyer, "No, I'm not whipped. I found Newport and I found the store, and I can find another good town and another store. Just wait and see." He learns the lesson. Control the land and you control the business. Doesn't that sound familiar? Listen to Ray Kroc's episode. And success invites competition. That's the law. That's a universal law. And he will never, ever forget this. When Walmart expands, Sam made sure that they owned or controlled their real estate. Always. A mistake made once, never repeated. Bentonville, a humble reset. He finds a store in Bentonville, Arkansas. The store does $32,000 a year, which was compared to $250,000 in Newport is not good. And he's starting over. He has to. Way back over. And he says, now, I had a store to run again. And even though I didn't do the money that I expected to do, it didn't matter because I had big plans. And that's the mindset. You get knocked down, but you get up again. You pick yourself up. In judo, we say you get thrown down 8 times, you get up 9. You rebuild. Then he reads about self-service stores in Minnesota. I mentioned this before about how he decides to take a bus all night so he can get to 2 towns across to see this store, this self-service store. And he walks in and he studies the layout and he says, I liked it. So I did that too. That sentence is Walmart. He doesn't debate. He doesn't posture. He copies what works. There are 3 lessons that we can take. Ow. Oh, can you hear that? Oh, trigger warning. 3 lessons from this moment. He's always searching for useful information. He's willing to go to great lengths to get it. He copies everything that works. Years later, Sam is running these variety stores successfully, and he joins a group of other discount retailers. They meet regularly to compare numbers and strategies. And during this time, Sam notices something. They're astonished by Walmart's growth. He says, I remember they were just astonished. They could not believe the number of stores we were establishing. We were putting in 50 stores a year when most of our group would be trying to start 3, 4, or maybe even 5 a year. They had put artificial limits on themselves. We can only open 5 stores a year. Anything more is mad. But Sam showed them that those limits didn't exist. It was just a story they were telling themselves. And I love this. Bruce Lee has a saying. He says, if you always put limits on everything you do, physical or anything else, it will spread into your work and into your life. There are no limits. There are only plateaus. And you must not stay there. You must go beyond them. Sam went beyond them. The 20-year overnight success. Sam starts Walmart in 1962. He's 44. And he says, folks have gotten the impression that Walmart was something I dreamed up out of the blue as a middle-aged man, and that it was just this great idea that turned into an overnight success. It's true. I was 44 when we opened our first Walmart in 1962, but the store was totally an outgrowth of everything that we'd been doing since Newport. Then he adds this crucial line. Like most other overnight successes, it was about 20 years in the making. That's the secret so many people refuse to accept. It's not the idea. It's the decades. Sam continues. These years were so important. I remember those days mostly as a time of always looking around for ideas and items that would make our stores stand out. And the philosophy that would define his career? Most everything I've done, I've copied from somebody else. And again, remember in the beginning of this, what Charlie Munger said. He copied everything anybody else did that was smart. He just did it with more fanaticism. The first Walmart, Rogers, Arkansas. That's where the first Walmart opened. David Glass, who would later become CEO, visited that opening. He said, it was the worst retail store I had ever seen. Sam had bought a couple of trucks of watermelons and stacked them on the sidewalk. He had a donkey ride out in the parking lot. It was 115 degrees and the watermelons began to pop and the donkeys began to do what donkeys do. And when you went inside the store, the mess just continued, having been tracked in all over the floor. He was a nice fella, but I wrote him off. It was just terrible. But from Sam's perspective, if you're willing to walk through donkey mess mixed with watermelon juice just to save a couple of dollars, what will you do when I actually get my act together? He was testing an hypothesis. We were trying to figure out if customers in a town of 6,000 people would come out of our kind of barn and buy the same merchandise strictly because of price? And the answer was yes. And Sam says, I was feeling pretty good after we got those first 3 stores up and running. I knew it would work. Everybody was skeptical, but I knew in my bones that it was going to work. Walmart went public in 1970, October 1st, 1970. Sam is 52 years old, and the day after the IPO, he experiences this weird feeling. He says it was one of the greatest feelings of my life, knowing that all of our debts were finally paid off. Because, believe it or not, for 8 years until that IPO, Sam was in debt up to his eyeballs. He had pledged everything, houses, property, everything that he had. People asked why he didn't retire now, finally, because now, finally, he was rich. He could finally kick back. And Sam says, I enjoyed doing what I was doing so much and seeing this thing grow and develop and seeing our associates and partners do so well. I could never quit. I made a promise to myself that I'm not going to let this money ruin my life. Until the day he died, he kept that promise. He drove a pickup truck because he could fit his hunting dogs in it. He got his hair cut at a barber shop. He lived simply. There's a story in the book about how at one point he went to someone's house and said, do you mind if I hunt in your backyard? The guy's like, aren't you Sam Walton? You could afford to buy a massive piece of land and go hunting in your own land. He said, why? Well, I could just ask you if I could hunt on yours. He lived simply because money was never his motivation. Missionaries and mercenaries, remember? Creating great businesses was the motivation. Money just enabled him to keep creating, keep working. Every episode, I like to have the one-person empire toolkit. Your inner Walton, I'm calling this one. So let's convert Walton into tools that we can actually use. Because the point of studying greatness isn't admiration. It's replication. So tool 1, get up every day, determined to improve something. I think it was David Glass who said the 2 things about Sam Walton that distinguish him from almost everyone else I've ever met. First, he got up every day, bound and determined to improve something. Second, he was less afraid of being wrong than anyone I've ever known. And once he saw he was wrong, he just shook it off and headed in the other direction. Get up every day, bound and determined to improve something. Not transform something, but reinvent something. Improve something. One thing, daily. Because like Charlie Munger says, that's compounding. Or said, rest in power, Charlie Munger. And Walton said, I could never leave well enough alone. And in fact, I think my constant fiddling and meddling with the status quo may have been one of the biggest contributions to the later success of Walmart. Where right now in your life are you leaving or living with good enough? What's the one thing that you promise me you will improve today? Tool 2, mentioned this many times, know your numbers cold. Walton carried a ledger sheet with 15 different columns for every single store. Sales, expenses, net profit, markdowns, utilities, insurance, taxes. And he entered them by hand every single month with a pen. He said, I entered the numbers myself each month with a pen, which helped me remember them better. It became a habit with me. I carried this ledger sheet in my pocket when I went to the stores so everybody knew exactly where they stood. Henry Singleton, which is one of the smartest operators ever, by the way, did the same thing. He paid all the bills and signed all the checks. He called it a form of discipline. I have this, by the way. I have this book, and I say, here are the 4 things I'm going to get done today. And at the end of the day, I say, did I do those 4 things? Yes or no? That's it. At the end of every week, I look at it, and I ask myself, why didn't I get to finish those 4 things? And then write the reason. Will I be doing it next week? Why will I do it? What can I fix that stopped me from doing it last time that I can do next week? That's it. Every single day. It is a form of discipline. In Sam Walton's own words, he says, Through doing the signing, it's amazing how much you learn about the business. There's a reminder of each event or action behind every check. It influences your feel for what direction you're going to go. Knowing your numbers isn't about accounting. It's about mixing intimacy with reality. What numbers do you not know about your own business right now? What would change if you manually entered them every single day, every single week? Tool 3, control expenses better than your competition. Walton said, when it comes to Walmart, there's no two ways about it. I'm cheap. I think it's a real statement that Walmart never bought a jet until we were approaching $40 billion in sales. Why? Because we exist to provide value to our customers, which means that in addition to quality and service, we have to save them money. Every time Walmart spends $1 foolishly, it comes right out of your customers' pockets. Every time we save them $1, that puts us one more step ahead of our competition. And Charlie Munger, he said, the winner usually goes to extremes, maximizing or minimizing one or a few variables. And Sam went to extremes, minimizing expenses. Here's the math. Our costs run less than 3%, while it probably costs our competitors between 4.5 to 5% to get the same goods to the stores. If we both sell the same goods for the same price at retail, we'll earn 2.5% more profit than they will. Over time, that 2.5% advantage compounds to billions. In retail, where margins are thin, that difference is everything. So where are you spending money out of habit rather than necessity right now? What would change if every dollar came directly from your pocket as opposed to your business? I mentioned before, he invested in technology, right? He invested heavily in technology. Planes, computers, distribution centers, communication systems. He said there's no question about it. One of the main reasons we've been able to roll this company out nationally was all the pressure to invest so heavily in technology. And we've been able to move away, way ahead in the industry in both communications and distributions. Andrew Carnegie, who I'll do a podcast on, he knew this 150 years before. He always said you need to invest in technology because the savings compound, because it gives you an advantage over slower moving competitors. And it can be the difference between a profit and a loss. The math, again. The time savings and flexibility are great, but the cost savings alone would make the investment worthwhile. Our costs run less than 3%, while it probably costs our competitors between 4.5 to 5%. In retail, where margins are thin, the 2% difference is everything. Technology is not an expense. It is a weapon. The other thing, speed. Speed is a form of strategy. What technology are you avoiding because it just seems too expensive? What would happen if your competitors adopted it first? Tool 5. Think small, even as you grow big. Walton said, the bigger Walmart gets, the more essential it is that we think small, because that's exactly how we became a huge cooperation, by not acting like one. Above all, we're a small town merchant, and I can't tell you how important it is for us to remember that when we puff our chest and brag about all these huge sales and profits, they were all made one day at a time, one store at a time, and all by hard work. And then my favorite line, for us, thinking small is a way of life. It's almost an obsession. The bigger you get, the more you need to think small. Otherwise, bureaucracy will kill you. Sam said, you never set out to get bureaucracy. You just get it, period, without even knowing it. So you've always got to be looking for ways to eliminate it. His framework for removing unnecessary layers? If you're not serving the customer or supporting the folks who do, we just don't need you. That's a scalpel. Where has bureaucracy crept into your business? What layers exist that simply don't serve your customers? Tool 6. By endurance, we conquer. Sam wrote, I read in a trade publication not long ago that the top 100 discounters in business in 1976, that 76 of them had simply disappeared. Think about that. 76% of the top 100 simply went bankrupt. Why? They just didn't stay close enough to their business. Most of these early guys were very egotistical people who loved to drive big Cadillacs and fly around in their private jets and vacation on their yachts. They were living high. And most of them could still be around today if they'd followed some basic principles around running good stores. But somewhere along the line, they stepped short of setting the goals and paying the price that needed to be paid to get them. By the way, Michael Jordan talked about this exact same thing. He said many NBA players were operating mostly off their great store of talent, absent any serious attention to the important details of the game. Whereas Jordan had been surprised to learn how many lazy Olympic teammates did not want to practice and were deceiving themselves about what the game required. Deceiving themselves. Walton would say they just stopped paying the price. Ernest Shackleton's family motto, by endurance we conquer. You don't have to be the smartest. Don't have to be the best funded. You don't even have to be the most talented. You just have to outlast everyone else. Where are you tempted to give up? What would change if you committed to outlasting your competition? We end every episode with the rules, right? With the challenge, with this week's challenge. And this week's challenge is to remember the rules of Sam Walton. And it's interesting because he doesn't have work hard on his list. Because he believes if you don't know that already, you probably won't be going far enough to read his list. But the list is simple. I've set it up before and I'm going to say it again. Rule 1, commit to your business. Believe in it more than anybody else. Overcome every single one of your shortcomings by sheer passion you bring to your work. If you love your work, you'll be out there every day trying to make it the best, trying to be the best at it. And soon, other people around you will notice and catch your passion like a fever. Share your profits with your associates and treat them as partners. Remember to motivate your partners. Money and ownership alone are not enough. Constantly think of new and more interesting ways to motivate and challenge your partners. Set high goals, encourage competition, and keep score. Keep everybody guessing as to what you might do next. Never become too predictable. Rule 4, communicate everything you possibly can to your partners. The more they know, the more they'll understand. The more they understand, the more they'll care. And once they care, there's no stopping them. Rule 5, appreciate everything your associates do for your business. A paycheck, stock options, will buy one kind of loyalty, but all of us like to be told how much somebody appreciates what we do. We like to hear it often, and especially when we have done something we're really proud of. Nothing else can substitute for a few well-chosen, well-timed, sincere words of praise. They're free, but they're worth a fortune. Rule 6, celebrate your success. Find humor in your failure. Don't take yourself too seriously. Loosen up, and everybody around you will loosen up too. Have fun and show enthusiasm always. Number 7, listen to everyone in your company. The folks on the front lines, the ones who actually talk to your customers, are the only ones who really know what's going on. You better find out what they know. Rule 8, exceed your customers' expectations. If you do, they'll come back. Rule 9, control your expenses. Far better than your competition. This is where you can find a competitive advantage. For 25 years running, Walton's ranked as number 1 in its industry for the lowest ratio of expenses to sales. You can make a lot of different mistakes and still recover if you run an efficient operation. You can be brilliant and still go out of business if you're too inefficient. And rule 10, swim upstream. Go the other way. Ignore conventional wisdom. If everybody else is doing it one way, there's a good chance you can find your niche by doing it exactly the opposite way. But be prepared for a lot of people waving you down and telling you that you're heading the wrong way. Your assignment? Choose one rule. Live it for 7 days. Not casually. Fanatically. Then write down what changed, because that's how Walton did it. Small improvements, taken seriously, repeated. That's how you build Walmart. That's how you build anything that lasts. April 5th, 1992. 74 years old, blood cancer. Sam Walton dies. In the months before he died, he kept working. He spent his final days categorizing, organizing, collecting, curating his knowledge so that future generations could benefit. The richest man in America, dying, using his final bits of energy and attention, not for himself, but for you. At the end of his life, he asked himself the hard questions. Was it really worth all the time I spent away from my family? Should I have driven my partner so hard all these years? Am I really leaving behind something on this earth that I can be proud of having accomplished? And he answered the question. Here's how I look at it. My life has been a trade-off. If I wanted to reach the goals I set for myself, I had to get it, and I had to stay at it every day. I had to think about it all the time. Having now thought about this a lot, I can honestly say that if I had the choices to make all over again, I'd make the exact same ones. No regrets. So what did he leave us? Walmart, which has become the world's largest company. He also left us a philosophy that influenced Jeff Bezos, that built Amazon, using Walton's principles of frugality, bias for action, and customer obsession. Bernie Marcus, founder of Home Depot, he learned it all from Sam. Jim Sinegal, founder of Costco, studied Sam. And a book that continues to teach entrepreneurs how to build a business that matter. And here's what I find most remarkable. Sam Walton didn't invent retail. He didn't create a new category. He didn't patent a breakthrough technology. He just did what everyone else was doing. Better, cheaper, constantly, and for longer. In his own words, most everything I've done, I've copied from somebody else. And as Charlie Munger observed, he copied everything anybody else did that was smart. He just did it with more fanaticism. So he just blew right by them all. That's the lesson. Greatness doesn't require genius. It requires relentlessness. Simple ideas taken seriously for a long time. That becomes your unfair advantage. We just get after it and stay after it. That's how you build Walmart. That's how you build anything that lasts. Ford revolutionized manufacturing. Edison controlled invention. Disney protected creativity. Jobs integrated everything. Walton outlasted everyone. The question isn't whether you can build something great. It's whether you're willing to stay at it long enough for greatness to simply compound. So let me ask you, what are you willing to get after and stay after for the next 20 years? What simple idea could you execute with more fanaticism than anyone else has the discipline to do? Until then, remember Sam's words. First, amaze yourself. Then everybody else will have no choice but to pay attention.